We've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated, both militarily and economically and in every other way. And
ladies and gentlemen, on 12th April 2026, Donald Trump announced something on Truth Social, and that single post triggered massive volatility and sent shockwaves to the Indian market. He posted that the US Navy will now be blockading any ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz.
It's President Trump announcing that effective immediately, the U.S. will start to blockade ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz.
Tonight, President Trump says the United States will blockade the Strait of Hormuz, stepping up pressure on Iran after peace talks in Pakistan ended without a breakthrough.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has just posted on Truth Social.
but we're putting on a complete blockade. We're not going to let Iran make money on selling oil to people that they like and not people that they don't like, or whatever it is. It's going to be all or none, and that's the way it is.
With the recent blockade of Hormuz, we have already seen what could happen in India with the LPG crisis if the trade is blocked for a long time. But the worst part is even scarier. India, after such a long time, can again go through a food crisis. And that will be terrifying for every one of us. Now, one question comes to our mind is that India, which is the world's largest agricultural country, and agriculture, which is supposed to be the backbone of India, then how can it be affected by a war which is happening thousands of miles away from India? Why will we witness a food crisis if the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked for a long time? Now, see this. What you see on the screen, these are the supply lines that feed India. These are the critical fertilizer supply lines that help every crop in India to grow. But before moving further, here's a quick question for you guys. And whoever knows the answer, comment the right option. And whoever's answer is right, I will give a like to their comment so that other people get to know. Question is, which chemicals are important in a fertilizer for our crops to grow? Option A, Option B, Option C or Option D. Now let's get back to the video. The image you see on the screen shows three different chemical nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. These are the most important nutrients that help our soil to grow crops. And the shocking part is that not a single of them is controlled by India.
India today relies heavily on imports for key fertilizer inputs, phosphates, potash, and indirectly natural gas for urea production.
Farmers in India fear a shortage of fertilizers as prices soar due to the economic impact of tensions in the Middle East. India is a big importer, with much of its supply coming from Middle Eastern countries like Oman and Saudi Arabia.
क्योंकि जिस सप्लाई चेन पर भारत की खेती टिकी है, उसका एक बड़ा हिस्सा मिडिल ईस्ट के उसी रास्ते से होकर आता है जहां आज तनाव बना हुआ है.
India's fertilizer supply chain is under pressure, and the impact is already reaching farmers on the ground. Across parts of the country, cultivators say key inputs like urea and DAP are either unavailable or being sold at sharply higher prices.
Now this is the part where it gets scary. We all have read in our textbooks about the Green Revolution in India, which started in the 1960s. That's the reason India effectively ended its reliance on imports and achieved its food security. But let's look at the agricultural data going all the way back before the Green Revolution to 1950. This is India's food grain yield data over the last 73 years. And the second line shows the fertilizer consumption per hectare, where in 1951 we produced 536 kilograms of grain per hectare. We applied 0.49 kg of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium per hectare. As it turns out, today we produce 2550 kg of grain per hectare with the NPK use of 139 kg in the same piece of land. And if you see the ratio, it will terrify you. You know why? Where our yield has gone up by 5 times, the fertilizer use has gone up by 280 times. And not just this, about 50% of these fertilizers are imported directly from the Persian Gulf countries, which passes through this narrow 33-kilometer wide seaway called the Strait of Hormuz.
This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's just 33 kilometers wide.
It's a crucial pathway for the movement of goods in this part of the world.
It's a narrow waterway, but transits about 20% of the world's daily consumption of oil.
And what you don't know is that the Indian government has been protecting the farmers with all their might.
Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav announced that the cabinet has approved an NPK fertilizer subsidy for Kharif 2026 season with a total outlay of 41,534 crore rupees. Let's listen in.
हम सब जानते हैं कि माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने कोविड हो चाहे वेस्ट एशिया में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो, किसानों के लिए, किसान भाइयों के लिए एक हमेशा एक तरीके से सेफ्टी शील्ड बन के खड़े हुए हैं।
जो यूरिया हमें महंगे दामों पर विदेशों से मंगाना पड़ता है, हम उसकी भी चोट अपने किसानों पर नहीं पड़ने देते। बीजेपी सरकार सब्सिडी देकर वो भार सरकार खुद उठाती है।
In fact, you will be shocked to know that the Indian government buys fertilizers at 2,200 rupees per bag, but it sells it to a farmer for just 242 rupees. So for each bag of fertilizer, a farmer saves 1,958 rupees because of the government subsidies. In total, the Indian government will spend 3.4 lakh crore rupees on fertilizer subsidies after the US, Iran and Israel conflict. And if you look at the central government budget allocation data, you will find that the Indian government spends more on giving subsidy to farmers than on education and healthcare. Now when I saw this 1.95 lakh crore rupees, I thought this is an insane number. But then I said it's okay. After all, it is helping our farmers, right? But after that, I found something even scary. Till now, we all have known the good side of the Green Revolution, that how it saved millions of people from starvation. But what if I say that there is a dark side of it that many of you were not aware till now? When I found this report telling the soil health data from Punjab, UP and Haryana, I found that this 1.95 lakh crore rupees subsidy is not helping our farmers. In fact, it is killing their land which they were supposed to protect. That simply means that even if their fields are gonna turn into barren lands, they will still need more fertilizers every year, which means more imports, a bigger subsidy bill from the taxpayers' money, and more dependence on countries for cheap fertilizers. This has already brought the lands of Punjab and Haryana to become barren lands within decades. The groundwater is already contaminated with toxic chemicals, and no amount of subsidy can fix the dead soil. Friends, today, Indian farmers feed 1.4 billion people. So the question is, when agriculture is supposed to be the backbone of India, why is India not Atmanirbhar for fertilizers? When it is acting as poison, why is the Modi government so helpless with the supply of fertilizers? And when everyone is watching oil prices, and when news channels are busy covering the issue of Hormuz blockade as an energy crisis, how the food on your plate next year depends on this 33-kilometer stretch of water that India has zero control over. Let's find our answers in this today's episode. Friends, now before understanding why India is in trouble, you should have this little knowledge about how the food you eat actually grows. Now, I myself do organic farming on my terrace, and if you also do, this will be much easier for you to understand. See, every plant on earth, whether it is rice, wheat or even a simple plant of tomato, need three things to grow: nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. We call it NPK, and these nutrients together are the difference between food and an empty plate. Let's understand this with the tomato plant. Take a look at this tomato plant. Now imagine this plant is not getting enough nitrogen. So what happens next? Nitrogen is what makes the plant green. This is the building block of chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is what captures sunlight and turns it into energy. So without nitrogen, your plant cannot photosynthesize. The leaves turn yellow, the plant slowly stops growing, and eventually it dies. Now comes phosphorus. Phosphorus is the underground workhouse. It builds the root system, transfers energy through the plant, and is responsible for flowering and fruiting. So if your plant is not getting enough phosphorus, the roots stay weak, the flowers don't grow properly, and even if they do, the fruits will never develop fully. And lastly comes potassium. Potassium is the immune system of the plant. It regulates water inside the plant cell, activates enzyme, and it protects the crop from disease and infection. Now here's the worst part of the potassium deficiency. A potassium deficient plant looks completely healthy from outside, but is weak from inside. one bad infection or one pest attack and your entire yield collapses overnight. So do you see, without nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, you will get no yield. Now here is something more important to know. The soil on which we grow crops is not a magic box that keeps giving forever. Every single time you grow a crop, you are pulling this nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium out of the ground. This is the reason each time you grow a crop, the soil must be fed as much as the plant is. Now, if we go back to 100 years ago, humans had absolutely no idea how to put these nutrients back to soil. That was the reason why there were several famines in history. The world could not feed the enough people as the population rose. In fact, in the 1800s, the world almost ran out of food. Yes, not in one country or one region. The entire world was staring at a food collapse. And do you know what was the only source of nitrogen at that time was? Well, that was the poop of this little bird called guano cormorant. Yes, literally their poop was used as a source of fertilizers. In fact, their poop was laid over 60 meters at the Chincha Island. And to build that 60-meter thick poop layer, it took over centuries. But as it turns out, from 1840 to 1870, Peru exported around 12 to 15 million tons of this guano to feed the world crop, which then depleted the guano over years. And finally, till 1874, they ran out of this. Now, after this, the world was about to go through multiple food crises, and that could be devastating for the humanity. And as expected, that really happened. But you know what was the shocking part? The crisis during the 1890s was not just because the world ran out of their nitrogen source. There was also a catastrophic event going together, which we today call as El Nino. In fact, the famine from 1896 to 1900 was driven by some of the world's most powerful El Nino ever recorded in the human history. And because of that, 30 to 60 million people died because of food shortage. But then something miraculous happened. Scientists knew one thing, that nitrogen was everywhere. In fact, 78% of the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen. But you know, plants cannot directly absorb it from the air. So in 1909, a German chemist called Fritz Haber did something that was about to change the human history forever. He discovered that if you take nitrogen from air and hydrogen from natural gas and crush them together at temperatures between 400 to 500 degrees Celsius, under pressure exceeding 200 atmosphere, with an iron catalyst, you will get ammonia or NH3. And this ammonia is the foundation of all nitrogen fertilizers. Then came a chemical engineer called Carl Bosch, and he scaled this reaction from a lab experiment into something that could feed the entire civilization. And that is why this Haber-Bosch process is considered as the most important chemical reaction in the human history. Because without it, the earth could only support around 4 billion people. But today, you, me and the 8 billion people are able to eat because one man discovered one equation. But you know, here's where the story gets even darker. The hydrogen that goes in the Haber-Bosch process comes from natural gas. So no natural gas means no hydrogen. No hydrogen means no ammonia. No ammonia means no fertilizer. And no fertilizers means no food in your plate. And this is where we are about to find that it's not an economic problem. This is a geopolitical trap that India has been walking into over the last 70 years without realizing it. Now look what I found. India is actually the world's third largest producer of ammonia. But as it turns out, we don't produce all of it on our own. We either buy ammonia directly or we import gas from the Gulf countries and then produce ammonia. So both ways, ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single time. Now let's talk about phosphorus, and this time you will be shocked to know that there's one country that controls about 70% of the world's phosphate reserve, and this country is Morocco, which has tens of billions of tons of phosphate reserves. Now compare this to India. India has only a small fraction of it, which is around a few million tons. Yes, you heard right, not billions but millions. And then comes potassium, which is again concerning. You know why? Because just like phosphorus, over 70% of the global potassium reserves are in these three countries, Canada, Russia and Belarus. And the worst part is that two of these countries, Belarus and Russia, are currently under the Western sanction, and that has already resulted in the disruption in the global potash market, and India is scrambling for whatever is left. So let me clarify you again. For nitrogen, the Gulf gas passes through Hormuz. For phosphorus, Morocco has over 70% of the reserves, which India has no strategic control over. For potassium, Russia and Belarus are the most sanctioned countries on this planet. So every nutrient that feeds India comes from a country that India has zero leverage over. Now you might ask that surely India saw this coming, and the answer is yes. In fact, the Modi government has announced a plan long time ago to make India self-sufficient in urea by 2025. Their plan was to build 5 new plants in Odisha, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand and Bihar to produce urea and to end all the imports. But as it turns out, urea imports in the Kharif season 2025 were the highest India has ever recorded. India imported about 58.62 lakh tons of urea in just 6 months, which was more than double from the previous year. Seems like the intention was right, but the dependency only grew deeper. And friends, this time the trap is not just fertilizers. It is about who controls the food of 1.4 billion people. And right now that answer is not India, which turns out to be a ticking time bomb in this Kharif season. Now this is where everything we talked about stops being a future warning and becomes a national emergency. You know why? This is because the Kharif season is here and the crisis has still not ended yet. The same routes that carry the urea ships from Gulf and LNG for our ammonia plants, all of them are stuck in the Hormuz. And you know what's even more shocking? The international urea rate, which was $447 per ton in February 2026, by the June 2026, that same ton cost $947. And this is where our second question arises, that why is the Modi government so helpless with the fertilizer supply? As it turns out, the Ministry of Chemical and Fertilizers floated an emergency global tender for urea. And when that wasn't enough, they floated a second tender of 70 lakh tons in the same season. But the problem didn't stop there. While Hormuz was squeezing supplies from one side, the El Nino outlook for 2026 reported that India could face the weaker monsoon than ever. So less monsoon means less yield, which will result in less food production, and that will create food depression. Now, to be fair, Modi government is really doing something. This time, India proactively stocked around 200 lakh tons of fertilizer before the season began. And this is a historic jump from 1/3 of its requirement to over 50%. Even the natural gas priority mandate says that the fertilizer plants will get 70 to 75% of their gas needs from the domestic sources. So no doubt that the government is playing smart moves, but as it turns out, all of this is just an emergency management and not any kind of structural reform that India needed to build over the last 70 years. Now the obvious question is, what is the way out of all this problem? And the answer exists in 3 levels. Number 1, the single most powerful thing a farmer can do is to get a soil health card which the government issues for free. Because right now, the average farmer from Punjab, UP and Haryana are applying 8 times more nitrogen, which is again poisoning their groundwater and killing their land. Number 2, instead of using an entire bag of fertilizer, a farmer can replace it with nano urea, which is even more efficient than the whole bag of urea. Yes, a single bottle of nano urea can replace an entire 45 kg bag of fertilizer. And states like Haryana, UP and Andhra Pradesh are already deploying nano urea as a safer alternative. Number 3, now for those who are building businesses in the agri sector, there is a big opportunity waiting for them. The government is looking for agri drone companies. And if you are building in the drone space, that will be the best business opportunity for you, as the government itself is funding and expanding the agricultural drone sector. And last but not the least solution, do organic farming on your field or on your terrace. And when people hear this, they think it's just a hobby. But here's what terrace farming will actually teach you. When you grow your own vegetables, even just a few, you stop taking food for granted. You will understand that the soil needs care, the water matters, and whatever goes into the soil comes back to you. Even if 10% of the urban households starts organic farming, it will create a huge impact. Buy local where you can. Choose organic when possible and waste less food. Because every kilo of food you waste is a kilo of fertilizer that was imported, subsidized and paid by your tax money. That's all from my side. If you learned something valuable, please subscribe and hit that like button. Also tell in the comments what are your thoughts about this solution. And please tell how was the video. I'll meet you in the next one. Until then, bye.